The four-day party starts at Belfast City Hall. And with Eddie Irvine, John Watson, Giacomo Agostini and Jarno Trulli and the Jordan Grand Prix Team in town, a motorsport market and a celebrity auto test to build the tempo, Belfast is revving as high as the Mugen Honda engines that will scream up the Stormont Straight on Monday. So where did this remarkable Irish motoring success story begin? Well, in many ways, racing in Ireland, as with many things, began by accident.
It is the oldest British racing car in the world, and it is the reason that the Gordon Bennett races were held in Ireland in 1903. This car won the 1902 Gordon Bennett Trophy, running from Paris to Innsbruck. Mr. Selwyn Francis Edge was driving it, and the next year Great Britain had to host it because he won, and of course we weren't allowed to race on the roads in Great Britain or in England, so they allowed us to race on the roads in Southern Ireland.
There was a speed limit in force in England at the time, I think, wasn't there?
Well, there was a speed limit of about 12 miles an hour. It had been increased in 1896 from 4 miles an hour, but they're just still, today there isn't any racing on the road, so in Ireland it was easy to alter a little act of parliament to allow us to do it over here.
From the oldest racing car to the oldest Rolls-Royce.
Well, Tom, this is a lovely old lady you've got here. Tell us a little bit about her.
Well, it's 1904. It's the first model that Royce developed, and he produced 16 of them between 1904 and 1907.
So this is actually the oldest Rolls-Royce?
It's the oldest known one, anyway.
Amazing, and obviously, I mean, it looks superb. Does it go as well as it looks?
Very well, yes. Do about 40 miles an hour.
Well, what about the engine? Is it simple to work at, or does it take a lot?
You see it. It's two-cylinder, 1800 cc's.
By today's standard, it doesn't look to be a lot of it, but it obviously is a very effective unit.
Yes, well, for the period, yes, certainly.
Pre-war and post-war racing in Ulster was dominated by the tourist trophy races on the Newtonards and Dundrod circuits. The advent of the Kirkuson circuit brought about the creation of the Irish racing car industry, and cars like the Tommy Graham 1172cc Ford Special, driven here by Frank Nuttall. John Crosley built his own 1172 Special, and that was the start of something big.
My interest in motor vehicles started when I was at school, and it was motorbicycles. I was addicted to motorbicycles. There was a man, very famous man in Belfast, great builder of Ford Specials called Tommy Graham, and I talked to him and decided that the thing to do was to build a car for myself. Because I'd made some of the motorbicycles I'd been racing on, I'd made the frames and done that for a few years. Eventually made a car. I sold it and built another one for myself, and that was the way it grew to begin with. 62 we set up and built a couple of sports racing cars. Then the 9S appeared in 66, which was a 2-litre edition of that. And when Formula Ford came along in 69, that really got us launched in reasonable quantities of production. We won the European Championship in the first year, 1969. Jerry Birrell, the late Jerry Birrell, whose brother Graham's here today.
The 25F Formula Ford brought the Belfast company great success at home and abroad. This groundbreaking model was driven by many young drivers on their way up the racing ladder, including Nigel Mansell. Crosley hit their production heights with the 32 and 35F models seen here, of which almost 200 were produced. To this day, they're used in racing schools across the world and still winning races. Brian Nelson brought Crosley enormous success at home and abroad, and at Stormont he is reunited with the 22F model, in which he had many of those victories.
In 1970 I joined Crosley's outfit and drove virtually everything that he had, from Formula 2 down to Formula Super V, Formula Atlantic, and the highlight of that year, I suppose, was John invited me to go to Sebring in Florida.
And how did you fare then, Florida?
Well, we won the race. We beat the champion, the American champion. We also put up fastest lap. We had a great time.
Arnie Black was also at great times and great results in Crosley cars, and now as managing director of the company, he makes them. Here he drives their 1970 Formula 2 car, the 18F.
Well, a few years ago I decided I'd like to change the direction, and having been a customer and paid John my life savings over the last 30 years, it was time to try and get some back. Proved wrong, of course, but I'm still trying. The green car I was running today, which is Tommy Reid's, was actually belonged to Billy Gowdy, and he and I competed in a pair of cars in England over the last few years and won the historic English Championship a couple of times. So it's a very nostalgic day for everyone.
So 40 years on, the company that John and Rosemary Crosley started continues. And as John drives another Irish racing legend, Jerry Kinane, around in the 9S, we are reminded that they are not the only people manufacturing racing cars on this island. David Shane's seen here in one of his early Formula Vs, has specialised in the Volkswagen suspended and powered single-seaters. Brian Harty has good reason to be grateful to the Wicklow manufacturer, as he has won 5 consecutive Irish titles in a Shane. And from next year, the company will be branching out with this Rover-engined racing car.
Mondale, the name Mondale was, we couldn't think of a name, but we tossed all our own letters, initials together and
Is
came
that
up
how
with
that
Mondale,
came about?
worldwide,
Oh.
so it means French for worldwide.
Is
so
that what it is?
that's how it started. So the first year we built about 18 cars.
Yeah.
Most of them all went to States and backed up Skip Barber, through Skip Barber in the racing school. And then the first new car, I think, into the UK, actually Eddie Irvine got it.
Oh, gosh.
I see. Him and his father happened to be present the first day we tested it.
Very
They
good.
were obviously impressed.
Any good memories of Eddie driving?
Oh, plenty. He used to race an odd car, 2 of mine, but I do remember him lent me a helmet one time when I won my first race in a 2-litre, so always plenty of crack with it. And then he took my 2-litre to England. Julie smashed it at Brands Hatch for me.
That was nice.
But that was Eddie.
Finally, 2 more ingenious home-built machines from architect George Scott's passion for building cars. His brother Liam drives the 2-litre Scott Road car, and George is in the latest Scott Climber. A former V8 engine creation of George's won the Irish Hillclimb Championship. So those are the race cars. The Irish-built road cars were not so successful in recent times. The Clan Crusader was cloned locally and sold with an Alfa Romeo engine. The Corrie Cultraw was similarly derived from a Welsh Davian car. This rally example is driven by Will Corrie and was used in competition by Brian Nelson and Derek Boyd. Stormont on August Bank Holiday Monday, and politics are dispensed with for the day. Well, not quite, as former World Rally champion and new MEP for Finland, Ari Vatanen, has flown to Belfast to be with his rally friends and to meet Nobel Peace Prize winner John Hume. Justin Reid, number 1, was the 1997 British quad racing champion. And he and current British Championship competitor Gordon Gilchrist represent the quad world in their 350 Yamahas. Paul Maguire has been all the way to Dakar in Paris on his 650cc KTM on the most grueling event of all. And Gordon Rockhard Crockhard rides the Wex Honda team and leads the British Motocross Championship. He lies 6th in the world. Tommy Reed started racing in 1958 and demonstrates the Formula 3000 car, which until recently held the outright Kyrgyzstan lap record. Tommy incidentally holds the pre-85 Formula Ford record for the County Down circuit. Sarah Kavanagh likes to play with the big boys, and that means Formula One. The Dublin girl races her Grand Prix Jordan in the Boss Series, BOSS, standing for Big Open Single-Seaters. The chicane has been removed for the Formula One cars. Mr. Quick, Jim McClement, revives memories of the mini Grand Prix days in his ultra-lightweight 1293cc example. The Dunlop RT2000s provide the current top saloon car action in Ireland these days, and Ken Bolger provided this one at Stormont. Has been many times an Irish saloon champion. These days, however, he's gone a little bit upmarket along with fellow Dubliner Paddy Shovlin, competing in the International Ferrari 360 Challenge. And before we leave the tin tops, let's remember Robert Ward, a production and special saloon car ace in my era, who today exercises a classic BMW M1. In amongst the demonstrations, there's some serious competition, especially amongst the 5 former champions of Formula Europa who have gathered at Stormont for this unique occasion. Morgan Dempsey, the first Formula Opel champion who's returned to the class this year, takes top honours and climbs in 34.9 seconds. Donald Lockery, who's not raced this year, is 0.8 of a second slower. Then it's the current champion Vivian Daly in 34.57 seconds, a suitable prelude to our Formula One guests at this magnificent Millennium Festival. Damien McGee, the Belfast boy who's rose from being a mechanic on the Falls Road to driving a Grand Prix, starts our Roll of Honour. Damien has borrowed Ken Dundee's Formula 3000 and remembers no doubt his days in Formula 5000 and his sole Grand Prix appearance. That was in 1975 when Damien drove for the fledgling Williams team in an ISO Marlborough. David Kennedy also had one Grand Prix outing, but many Formula One drives. In the British Series in 1979, he used this Wolf WR2 to gain a number of wins. David is the swiftest of the Grand Prix cars at Stormont and wins the Ulster Trophy, kindly donated for the occasion by the Ulster Automobile Club.
Well, it's a nice car. I go back a long way with this one, nearly 20 years, I'm really afraid to say. I raced this in the British Formula One series, and it's ex-Jody Scheckter, and Jody showed the big boys in a privateer team that you could nearly win at the top level. And I raced in the British Formula One series, and I won with this car 5 times. So it's got fond memories for me, and it's a lovely car to drive.
Great nostalgic event this today.
Yes, yeah. Nostalgia, I'm always a little bit worried about nostalgia, because you always feel old to be thinking about things like that. But to see that the Jordan have got the latest car here, the 199, and to see the Lotus 79 here, just beautiful cars. And then combined with these here, and that Daly got all the Irish Formula One drivers out, it's a great testimony to Irish motorsport, and long may it continue.
Kenny Atchison also had a short Formula One stay, but a very distinguished sports car career where the Cookstown driver drove for Mercedes. the Ram March was never one of his favourite cars.
I'm driving my original Grand Prix car, which sounds very grand, but it is probably the second, or the car that I hate most in my life.
Kenny, I'm really feeling sorry for you now.
Okay, that's all I'm going to win today, the sympathy vote, isn't it?
Martin Donnelly's Grand Prix career would probably have been long and successful had it not been for that fateful day in Jerez when he had that terrible accident in a Lotus. The Belfast driver is back in a Lotus today, and a very special one.
It's ex-Mario Andretti. He's got the side post, so it's good to be lifted up for the public roads, but in its day, that would have been run on the ground, gives extra downforce, and it was the car of its day back in 78, 79. Tom Tyndall used to do his lap charts for him at the race control at Kirkerson, so it's there, it's in the blood. Okay, I've had my accident, but you know, life goes on. I'm still involved in the sport I love, and among the people I love.
Derek Daly was a contemporary of David Kennedy, and the Dubliner drove for Theodore, March, Tyrrell and Williams in Formula One. Here he's reunited with his beloved FW08, which he drove in the 1982 season.
I am almost shell-shocked. This is so big, so good, perfect weather, and I mean, I'm looking up at Plum still likes me enough to invite me.
And you have a great car.
Yeah, I mean, to me, to get back into a Formula One car of my era, I haven't been in one since I stopped in '82. I mean, it's great to do it. I mean, it rekindles old memories of things that happened in the past. The amazing thing is, it's almost 20 years ago when you think it back into the early '80s.
We're on board the Jordan 191 with John Watson, our most successful Grand Prix driver to date. John had 5 wins to his credit during his long Formula One career, in which he drove for Brabham, Surtees, Penske and McLaren.
The Irish motorsport history, motorcycles, cars, Grand Prix, it sometimes is not really fully exploited. And I have a small part of that. Eddie Irvine's carrying it on right now in Grand Prix, and Jeremy McWilliams is doing the same in motorbikes, so I think it's fantastic. I think I've got probably the nicest Jordan ever made. It's the 191. It was the original Jordan Grand Prix car. I had the pleasure of driving it for the first time when the car was actually run for the first time. And Eddie did one of those very special deals. You drive my car, but I don't pay you. But, you know, it was 2 friends helping one another out. Gary Anderson from Coleraine, who had designed and was responsible for the car. You could see the big sort of sigh of relief as Jordan and Anderson went, well, maybe we've got a car that's going to do us justice.
Our current man, Eddie Irvine, is of course also a former Jordan driver. Eddie, the runner-up in the '99 World Championship, is at home amongst his people, and they're loving every moment of it. And to brighten up an already brilliant day, he's brought along his Danish delight. How appropriate, therefore, that Eddie is in a D-Type Jag, the car that was so much part of Ulster's racing history in the 50s.
It's great, you know, we've been very, very lucky with the weather. Let's hope we can just build it up and get the F1 Jaguar over here and do a run up the hill. That'd be the best thing.
Jordan Grand Prix are in town, not only with their first but also their most successful car, and Jarno has flown in from Spa to drive the 199.
Jarno, what do you think of this event?
Well, it's completely different from whatever I did before, so it's very strange.
You've heard of Northern Ireland before, and when you were told you were coming to a motorsport event here, were you surprised?
Oh yeah, of course, but I couldn't see a lot about Ireland.
Obviously the boss has told you a lot.
Oh yeah, he talked me about Dublin, and I had to go, but unfortunately then we didn't anymore. But sure, a
very soon I will go to Dublin.
Well, you're not actually racing today, but the demonstration. This is good for the crowds to see the cars close up.
I think it's really nice for the people, for all the people which came here. They can see Formula 1 cars very close.
For Benson and Hedges, Jordan is the first contemporary Grand Prix car that the Ulster public have seen in action since the 50s. So cover your ears as those 17,000 revs from the Mugen Honda engine ricochet off the assembly buildings. This is not the car's first appearance in Ulster. Its last was in the great Jan Manuel Fangio's hands during the Ulster Trophy race at the Dundrod Circuit some 50 years ago. McRae is entrusted with this priceless gem, which seems to be running better today than it did in Dundrod, and he's brought another Grand Prix gem for Sterling Moss to drive.
This is the first time it's been out for perhaps 2 or 3 years, and it's a very original car, It's never been touched in any way. Original chassis, body, everything, and now it's nice to be able to bring it out and to show it to the public. It's great.
The Maserati 250F was the McLaren of its day. It's the living proof of, if it looks right, it is right. The Italian car is one of the few foreign cars that the fiercely patriotic English gentleman drove in his early Grand Prix days. And as in everything that Sterling Moss sat in, he drove it to great effect. He won both the Monaco and Italian Grand Pros in a 250F. From Grand Prix to Le Mans, AO man Martin Byrne has a long love affair with the classic French 24-hour race. He has competed there many times, and he now owns Lola cars. So it's appropriate that he should have brought the Mark's fabulous V8 engine T70 long-distance racer to Stormont.
Yes, I like the company so much I bought the car.
The Mondello owner's interest in Le Mans continues to this day.
On Wednesday last week, we signed heads of agreements to make a Le Mans car for MG. It's an MG Lola. It's going to be for the 675 LM2 class, which on paper should have a chance of outright victory if everything went right.
And when are we going to see that in action?
We'll see it in action at the Le Mans test day in May next year.
Oh, so you've got to develop a brand new car before next May?
Yes, we do. We have a head start because we've been making some good sports cars last year and this year, so we have a base from which to run.
The other classic Le Mans car in action at Stormont is the Ford GT40, driven by Brazilian Thomas Enduras. This example is owned by the Ford Motor Company, and various versions of the GT40 won the most famous endurance race on 4 occasions in the 1980s.
Man with a GT40, which was in one of all.
But before leaving the Le Mans theme, Gary has found another bit of local history, the Stormont Lawns.
Well, of course, there are all sorts of exotic cars here at Stormont today, and this is one of the most exotic. It's the 1990 Toyota 90 CV, which raced in the Le Mans 24-hour race. It was driven by John Watson, and he took it up to speeds of 220 miles an hour.
Here's another fascinating piece of local history. This is the man that has won 5 Hot Rod World titles, Ormond Christie. The Crumlin driver was the first to use the Toyota Starlet on the ovals, This, however, is the Ford Fiesta that he won the 1996 and 97 world titles in. And as you can see, he's not just good at going round in circles. Seriously these days? Well, ask Michael Schumacher, Jenson Button, or indeed Jarno Trulli, who is not only a world champion, but also has his own karting business. The Northern Ireland Karting Association are using the occasion to show off their team for the forthcoming Five Nations Championship and some of their crazier machines, like Brian King's 250 Supercard. Colin Minari is a multiple Irish Supercard champion, and Keith Campbell is the current Northern Ireland Supercard champion. Karting starts from 8 years of age with the cadets, and the Lyons family have been in the game for generations. 11-year-old Isaac already has 3 seasons behind him. Next step up is the junior KTMs, and by then you're pretty experienced and have some serious ambitions.
Won the Irish Grand Prix 2 weeks ago, and been in well in both classes, so race TKMs as well.
And what's your ambition?
To make it either TOCA touring cars or World Formula 1.
The Ulster Vintage Car Club have gathered a mouth-watering collection representing the Ards races, which took place yards away from the Stormont site between 1928 and 1936. None of these are more special than the 1928 Hyper Lee Francis.
1928, Kay Don, who was one of the leading drivers at the time, he drove it in the TT races, as you know, it was the first TT race to be held here, and won with this very car. 2 years later, in 1930, my father acquired this car for me. He used to race in his earlier days and wanted to see me take it up. Yes, I collected a few trophies at my first year. Then the second year I was running in the Irish Grand Prix with it, got pole position, led for over 200 miles. Then unfortunately had trouble with the supercharger, some dirt got in it or something, and I had to come into the pits and change it. Lost my position. I was racing in Silverstone about 3 weeks ago, again next week, and then Brighton speed trials. It keeps me young. As long as the car keeps going, I'll keep going.
Well, we're delighted to hear it. It was great to see you here. Thanks very much.
Nice to see you.
89-year-old Tom is older than any of the cars in the Newton Ards TT lineup, and the Lee Francis is one of a number of cars at Stormont which actually took part in these great races. Cars like Simon Thomas's 1931 Alvis 1260, which was second in the 1928 race, driven by Leon Cushman. Jack Keatley's 1935 Aston Martin Ulster that was driven in its year of origin by P.L. Doskin and Tommy Wisdom. It retired after 16 laps with a broken rotor arm. And Alan Clark's 1936 Riley, which had a rather embarrassing outing on the Ards Cumber Dundonald Triangle.
Well, this car, yes, not so distinguished. When Riley's won in 1935, they were permitted to bring a show car the next year to close the course. But this particular car was the one, unfortunately, it broke down halfway around.
Others from the Manchester Vintage Car Club's entry, a period rather than actual racers, on the days when the citizens of Belfast climbed aboard the trolley bus to Donnelly to view the top drivers of the world in action.
It's the same car as what, basically the chassis is the same as what ER Hall drove in the RSGT in 19, whenever he was here this year. He averaged 87 miles an hour around the Irish circuit. And it would take you busy doing that in a motoring car today.
But before we get swept away in a wave of nostalgia, remember that keeping these racing relics in action can also have its downside.
But cars that ran on magnetors aren't quite as reliable as coils, and the TT of any car didn't get round because the magneto packed up, and we just got a little bit of that. But we've got to keep good humoured about it.
You sound as though you're used to it.
It's happened before.
After the war, the Tourist Trophy moved to the Dundrod circuit, where Sterling Moss made a big name for himself.
Northern Ireland, I think everything I've had here has been successful, actually. It's amazing, but it's a wonderful circuit. I mean, Dundrod really, not many better. Of course, not usable nowadays because they're too particular, but absolutely tremendous.
Are you sorry there's no road racing?
I think it's appalling. I mean, I really think the ruination of racing when they stop racing on proper roads, because what is real fun is going on a road that you're not normally allowed to do more than 30 miles an hour on, and then giving it hell. That's wonderful.
Sterling was 19 when he first raced at Dundrod, and he won in a Jaguar XK120. A year later, he was back in a C-type Jaguar, similar to this one, and he won again. And he took his third victory on the Antrim circuit after an epic battle with Mike Hawthorne and Desmond Titterington in 1955, driving for Mercedes.
And so to the checkered flag, and another 1-2-3 victory for Mercedes.
Among the other poignant memories of Dundrod at Stormont is Jaguar's Grand Prix driver Eddie Irvine in the D-type Jag, similar to the one raced by Hawthorne. And Stephen Curtis's rare HMW Jaguar. The competition to set fastest climb in the 2-litre Crosley Sports racing cars goes to Richard Parsons. Not surprising, as Richard was a multiple hill climb champion. Crosley owner Arnie Black is no match for his customer today. Hal Catherwood gets to within 0.2 of a second of the racing champion. As Russ Swift shows the Chancellor how to economise in tyre wear and puts a Rover 75 into spaces where minis are meant to fit on. Climbed to the top of this half-mile of magic will be keenly fought. Michael Phillips is the warm-up back, but he comes to grief on Watson's rise in his V8 TVR Tuscan. He's not alone, as Ken Dundee in his Formula 3000 Reynard also falls foul in the same corner. Three times Irish hill climb champion Richard Young has borrowed Tommy Reid's Formula 2000 Mondial, the last of these cars ever built, and climbs in 33.97 seconds. Jenny Kennedy made history by becoming the first woman to win the Irish Hill Climb Championship. She has a 2000cc Vauxhall engine Crosley and ascends in 33.16 seconds. Ronnie Mabon is also a double Irish champion, and he beats Jenny's time by 0.4 of a second in his Vauxhall engine Delta T80. Now we're into the quick stuff. This is Andy Kittle, a 3 times Irish champion in his Pilbeam MP62, fitted with a 2.8-litre Hart engine. The current Irish champion, Donald Griffin, is sensationally quick in 32.10. The final result is a shootout between the two Roberts, both Northern Ireland hillclimb champions and both in Pilbing MP82s. Robert Morgan's time, 31.35. But multiple Northern Ireland champion Robert Woodside upgraded his Pilbeam last year to gain back the title that he had held on a number of occasions, and he proves that he is top dog again at Stormont in the Woodside haulage car. His winning time, 30.55, an average of almost 60 miles an hour. From Paddy to present, somebody said, of the rally content of a festival, but in fact it starts before Hopkirk, with a reconstruction of Ronnie Adams, Derek Johnson and the late Frank Bigger's great Monte Carlo win in 1957 in the bulky Mark 7 Jaguar. Paddy is the best known of all the Irish stage stars, and he's back in his home city to drive one of Tom Turkington's X-Works Minis, reminding him of his great Monty wins.
It's great to see Stormont like I've never seen it before. You only see it in the bad news pictures of problems, and this is lovely to see everybody enjoying this beautiful park, really. I had no idea it was so big here.
It just shows the interest in motorsport that there's always been in Northern Ireland.
Well, you've created a lot of champions from Northern Ireland. I don't know why that is. I think because it was the enthusiasm for motorsport in Northern Ireland that made people want to do it. It's a bit like Scandinavia.
The majority of those champions are here today. Cathal Curley, famous for his wins in escorts and Porsches. Today he's in Ascona.
At my age, thrills are few and far between, you know, and I'm hoping that maybe there'll be a bit of a thrill here today.
Billy Coleman, the Irish rallying legend who was British champion in 1974. Rosemary Smith, the only Irish lady to win an international rally outright, drives the Sunbeam Tiger that she recently drove at Sebring. Anna McCartney in the Mini that her late husband Ronnie won the 1964 Circuit of Ireland in. And talk about history repeating itself, Jimmy McRae goes off in the Chevette in which he won the 1980 Circuit of Ireland Rally. He left the road in the same car 20 years ago, but he still won. And the man he had that epic battle with is also here, World Rally Champion Ari Vatman, who is reunited with Belfast co-driver Fred Gallagher in the type of car in which he won the World Crown. Louise Aiken-Walker is also a World Rally champion. She won the Formula 2 crown in 1990 for Vauxhall. Russell Brooks has brought over the Sierra Cosworth, in which he won the 1989 Tarmac Rally Championship. And 4 times Tarmac champion Bertie Fisher has borrowed Peugeot's Group B supercar, the T16. This is the car that Michael Sundstrom drove in Ireland in the 80s and indeed won the Lurgan Park Rally in. And talking about Group B supercars, this is probably the most fearsome of them all, the IDS-1, driven by Alistair Galloway. And so to the supercars of today. Frank Maher, another Tarmac champion, has come all the way from Tipperary to run his World Rally Car Escort. And James Cullen, the double Donegal winner, is having a real go in his Tony Kelly Cars entry. But the star entry is Andrew Nesbitt's Cuisine de France 2000 WRX Subaru Impreza, the man who will become the first Toshiba Tarmac champion of the new millennium. Now this Biggerstaff tries even harder in his 15-year-old Metro. Let's look at that rough Swift-style two-wheeler from inside the 6R4.